Welcome back. Unit 1 was the toolbox, opportunity cost, the PPC, comparative advantage. Unit 2 is where all of that finally meets price tags and real markets. This is supply and demand, the engine under basically every AP micro question from here on out. 4 stops on this one. First, demand and supply themselves, the law behind each curve, what shifts them, and the difference between moving along a curve and shifting the whole thing. Second, market equilibrium, where the two curves meet and what happens when one or both of them move. Third, elasticity, how sensitive buyers and sellers actually are to price changes. And fourth, price controls, tax and trade, where government steps into the market and we measure exactly what that costs in surplus. 4 stops, and by the end, you'll be reading these graphs like second nature. First stop. Honestly, the two most famous curves in all of economics. This section is about how buyers and sellers actually behave, why demand slopes down, why supply slopes up, what makes either curve move, and the one distinction the exam loves to test, a move along a curve versus a shift of the whole curve. Get this section locked and everything else in the unit builds cleanly on top of it. Start simple. Picture the price of your favorite snack doubling overnight. You'd probably buy less of it. That reaction right there is demand. Officially, demand is the willingness and ability to buy a good at different prices. Both words matter. Wanting something isn't demand if you can't actually pay for it. Why does the demand curve slope downward? 3 reasons. The substitution effect. When a good gets pricier, you swap toward cheaper alternatives. The income effect. A higher price makes your money stretch less far, so effectively you're poorer and buy less. And diminishing marginal utility. Remember that one from Unit 1? Each extra unit gives you less satisfaction, so you're only willing to pay less and less for more of it. Same logic, just now it's shaping your curve. Now, what actually shifts the whole demand curve? 5 non-price factors, and the mnemonic is timer. T is taste and preferences. Trends make people want more or less of something. I is income. More money, usually more buying. Unless it's an inferior good, more on that later. M is market size. More buyers in the market, more total demand. E is expectations, specifically expectations of future prices. If buyers expect the price to jump next week, demand rises today. If they expect a sale is coming, they wait, and demand falls now. And R is related goods price, substitutes and complements pulling demand in opposite directions. AP exam alert. Only a change in this good zone price moves you along the curve. All 5 timer factors shift the entire curve to a new position. Mixing these two up is the single most common point loss in this unit. That last note is exactly where this unit's biggest trap lives, so let's kill it right now with pictures. Move along the curve. This is a change in quantity demanded, and it only happens because of a change in price. Same curve, you just slide to a different point on it. Price goes from P1 to P2, quantity slides from Q1 to Q2, but it's still the same D. Whole curve shift. This is a change in demand, and it's caused by a non-price factor, one of your timer letters. The entire curve relocates. Shift right to D2 or D3 means demand increased. More is bought at every single price. Shift left means demand decreased. AP exam alert word choice is graded. Quantity demanded change means a move along the curve. Demand change means the whole curve shifted. Examiners read these as 2 different claims. Say the wrong one and you lose the point even if your graph is right. Now flip to the other side of the market, meet supply. Supply is the willingness and ability to sell a good at different prices. And the law of supply runs the opposite direction from demand. As price rises, quantity supplied rises too, a direct relationship. Why would a seller want to sell more at a higher price? Profit motive. Higher price, bigger payoff. Increasing marginal cost, producing more gets more expensive, so sellers need a higher price to make it worth it. And simple incentive, more reward, more willingness to produce. And just like demand has timer, supply has its own mnemonic for what shifts the whole curve, rotten. R is resource costs, price your inputs, less willingness to supply at each price. O is other goods price. If a farmer can earn more growing corn instead of wheat, wheat supply drops. T is technology, better tech, more efficient production, more supply. Another T is taxes and subsidies. A tax discourages production, a subsidy encourages it. E is expectations of future prices, but now from the seller's side. If producers expect higher prices ahead, some hold inventory back today, so current supply falls. And N is number of sellers. More firms in the market, more total supply. Same exact rules apply here, just mirrored to the other curve. Move along the curve, change in quantity supplied caused by a change in price. You slide along the same S-curve, price P1 to P2, quantity Q1 to Q2. Whole curve shift, change in supply caused by a non-price factor, one of your rotten letters. Shift right to S2 or S3 means supply increased. Shift left means supply decreased. Now put both curves on the same graph. That's where an actual price gets set. This section is about where supply meets demand and what happens the moment price strays from that point. We'll cover surpluses, shortages, and the part that trips people up. What happens when both curves move at the same time? Here's the meeting point. Everything in this unit revolves around. Equilibrium, labeled E, is the one point where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. QD equals QS at price PE and quantity QE. It's the price the market naturally settles at with nobody pushing it anywhere. Disequilibrium is any mismatch between QD and Qs at whatever price is currently set. Think about concert tickets. If the price is set too high, above equilibrium, quantity supplied outruns quantity demanded, QD is less than QS, and you get a surplus, unsold tickets. If the price is set too low, below equilibrium, quantity demanded outruns quantity supplied, QD is greater than QS, and you get a shortage, people who want in and can't get a ticket. AP exam alert. Given a price above or below equilibrium, don't just guess. Ask which curve gives more quantity at that price. Above equilibrium, sellers want to supply a lot, but buyers want less. Too much supply, a surplus. Below equilibrium, it flips, a shortage. Now shift just one curve at a time. 4 clean cases, and once you see the pattern, you'll never forget it. Decrease in demand. Price falls, quantity falls. Increase in demand. Price rises, quantity rises. Decrease in supply. Price rises, quantity falls. Increase in supply, price falls, quantity rises. Notice the pattern. When demand shifts, price and quantity move in the same direction. When supply shifts, price and quantity move in opposite directions. Skip memorizing 4 separate graphs, just track which curve moved, and the direction follows automatically. AP exam alert. Demand shift equals price and quantity move together. Supply shift equals price and quantity move apart. This shortcut alone answers a huge chunk of equilibrium shift questions in under 5 seconds. Now the twist. Both curves move at the same time, and suddenly you can't just read one answer straight off the graph. Single shifts are simple. One curve moves, the other holds still, and you get one clean answer for both price and quantity. But when both demand and supply shift together, one of those two, either price or quantity, becomes what economists call indeterminate. That just means it depends on which curve shifted more, and you can't know for sure without more information. Walk the 4 combinations. Demand down and supply down. Quantity is definitely down, but price is indeterminate. Demand down and supply up. Price is definitely down, but quantity is indeterminate. Demand up and supply down. Price is definitely up, but quantity is indeterminate. Demand up and supply up. Quantity is definitely up, but price is indeterminate. Don't try to memorize this table as 4 rows of numbers. Sketch it instead, draw the original equilibrium, shift both curves the way the question says, and just look at where the new intersection landed relative to the old one for the variable you're sure about. AP exam alert. Rule of thumb. Whichever curve shifts more determines the direction of the indeterminate variable. If you're not told which shifts more, the correct answer is indeterminate. Don't guess a direction the question didn't give you. Let's actually run one of these. Demand goes up, supply goes down at the same time. Price, definitely up. Both shifts are pushing price in the exact same direction. Demand rising pushes price up, and supply falling also pushes price up. When both forces agree, you can be certain. Quantity, indeterminate. Here the two forces are fighting each other. Demand rising pulls quantity up, but supply falling pulls quantity down. Which one wins depends entirely on which curve shifted by more, and without that information, quantity could genuinely go either way. Next up, how sensitive are buyers and sellers really when price or income or a related goods price changes? That's elasticity, and there are 4 flavors of it coming. This section is all about price sensitivity, putting an actual number on how much buyers and sellers respond when conditions change. Quick preview before we go deep on each one. 4 acronyms, 1 unifying theme. PED, price elasticity of demand, how buyers respond to a change in the goods own price. PES, price elasticity of supply, the same idea on the seller's side. CPED, cross-price elasticity of demand, how demand for one good responds to a price change in a different good. And YED, income elasticity of demand, how demand responds to a change in the buyer's income. 4 measurements, 1 theme, sensitivity to change. Start with the big one, price elasticity of demand. PED measures how sensitive buyers are to a change in price. The formula, percent change in quantity demanded divided by percent change in price. Quick worked example, price moves from 100 to 110. That's a plus 10% change. Quantity moves from 100 down to 80. That's a minus 20% change. PED equals 20% over 10%, which is 2. AP exam alert. Ignore the sign. PED always comes out negative mathematically, since price and quantity move opposite ways, but you report it as a positive number using the absolute value. Say PED equals 2, not negative 2. So what actually makes one good's demand more elastic than another's? Substitutes. The more alternatives available, the more elastic demand is. Buyers can easily walk away. Few or no substitutes means inelastic demand. Necessity versus luxury. Necessities like insulin are inelastic. You need it no matter the price. Luxuries like vacations are more elastic. Easy to skip if the price climbs. Time horizon. The more time buyers have to adjust, find alternatives, change habits, the more elastic demand becomes. In the short run, before people can adjust, demand tends to be more inelastic. Share of income. Big ticket items like cars eat a large chunk of your budget, so buyers are price sensitive, more elastic. Small purchases like salt barely register in your budget, so demand stays inelastic. The mnemonic to hold on to all 4, STAL, substitutes time and A, luxury share of income. Now put an actual number on it, 5 categories sorted by how the curve reads. Elastic. PED greater than 1, the percent change in price is smaller than the percent change in quantity, meaning buyers react strongly. Inelastic. PED less than 1, the percent change in price is bigger than the percent change in quantity, meaning buyers barely react. Unit elastic. PED equals exactly 1. The 2% changes match perfectly. Then the 2 extremes. Perfectly elastic, PED equals infinity. No change in price at all, and quantity swings freely. Picture a flat horizontal demand curve. Perfectly inelastic, PED equals 0. Price changes, but quantity doesn't budge an inch. Picture a vertical demand curve. Why does any of this elasticity math matter for a real business decision? Because it tells you exactly what happens to revenue when you change your price. 4 key points to hold on to. Marginal revenue hits exactly 0 right at the unit elastic point on the demand curve. Total revenue is at its maximum exactly where marginal revenue equals 0. When marginal revenue is positive, you're in the elastic range of demand, and total revenue is rising as price falls. When marginal revenue is negative, you're in the inelastic range, and total revenue is falling as price falls. AP exam alert. This is a classic free response setup. Given that demand is elastic or inelastic, predict what happens to total revenue when a firm raises or lowers price. Link it straight back to the determinants. A necessity with few substitutes, inelastic, means raising price raises revenue. A luxury with many substitutes, elastic, means raising price lowers revenue. Flip sides again. How sensitive are sellers to a price change? Price elasticity of supply measures exactly that. How much quantity supplied responds to a change in price. It uses the same 5 categories as PED. Elastic, inelastic, unit elastic, perfectly inelastic, and the same rule. Ignore the sign, since PES for a normal upward sloping supply curve is already positive anyway. Now step outside price of itself land. This one compares 2 different goods. Cross-price elasticity of demand measures how the quantity demanded of good A responds when the price of a completely different good B changes. Formula: percent change in quantity demanded of good A divided by percent change in price of good B. Substitutes give a positive CPED. Think rival goods or competing brands like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. When the price of one rises, demand for the other rises too, because buyers switch over. Complements give a negative CPED, goods that work best together like printers and ink. When the price of one rises, demand for the other actually falls because buying the pair together got more expensive overall. AP exam alert. Unlike PED, do not drop the sign here. The sign is the answer. Positive means substitutes, negative means complements. Reporting the absolute value throws away the entire point of the question. Last of the 4, how does a change in the buyer's income move demand? Income elasticity of demand measures how quantity demanded changes when consumer income changes. Formula: percent change in quantity demanded divided by percent change in income. Inferior goods give a negative YED. As income rises, demand actually falls because people trade up to something better. Think instant ramen or store brand goods, the stuff you buy less of once you can afford more. Normal goods give a positive YED. As income rises, demand rises, the common expected pattern like dining out or name brand goods. Quick gut check before we move on, because this exact contrast is where the four elasticities get scrambled together. PED and PES. The result can technically come out negative, but you ignore the sign entirely and focus on the absolute value. The magnitude of the response is what matters, not its direction. CPED and YED. Here you do the opposite. Pay very close attention to whether the result is positive or negative, because the sign itself tells you the relationship between the two goods or between income and demand. It's about direction, not magnitude. AP exam alert. Ignore the sign applies to PED and PES only. The sign is the answer applies to CPED and YED. This exact swap is a favorite multiple choice trap. Know which rule goes with which pair before you calculate anything. Last section. This is where government actually steps into the market. We'll cover what happens to surplus when the government sets a price by law, taxes a good, or taxes trade with a tariff, ceilings, floors, taxes, and tariffs, and what each one costs society. Before government touches anything, we need a way to measure how good a market outcome actually is. That's surplus. Consumer surplus, CS, is the area below the demand curve and above the price. It's the extra value buyers get, paying less than they were actually willing to pay. Producer surplus, PS, is the area above the supply curve and below the price. The extra value sellers get, receiving more than the minimum they were willing to accept. Total surplus, TS, is simply CS plus PS, and it's maximized exactly at the competitive, efficient equilibrium quantity. No intervention, no distortion. AP exam alert. Every price control, tax, and tariff-free response question wants you to shade and label CS and PS correctly on a graph. Practice drawing these two regions now before we start cutting into them. Now, government sets a price by law instead of letting the market find it, and it can go one of two ways. A price ceiling is a maximum price, set below equilibrium, used to protect buyers, usually for essential goods like rent-controlled housing. If it's binding, meaning it's actually below where the market would settle, it creates a shortage. Quantity demanded outruns quantity supplied at that artificially low price. A price floor is a minimum price, set above equilibrium, used to guarantee sellers a fair income, like a minimum wage or an agricultural price support. If it's binding, meaning it's actually above where the market would settle, it creates a surplus. Quantity supplied outruns quantity demanded at that artificially high price. AP exam alert. Binding only happens on the correct side of equilibrium. A ceiling placed above equilibrium does nothing. The market never wanted to go that high anyway. A floor placed below equilibrium does nothing either. Check the position before you claim any effect. Every time an intervention pushes the market away from equilibrium, some value just evaporates. That's deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is the loss of total surplus when a market outcome is inefficient. Mutually beneficial trades that simply don't happen anymore. Common causes: price ceilings and floors, taxes, imperfect markets, and externalities. How do you find the DWL area on a graph? 4 steps. 1. Find the efficient quantity, where the market would sit at plain equilibrium with no intervention. 2. Identify whatever is reducing the quantity actually traded. 3. Compare that efficient quantity to the actual quantity traded. 4. Shade the triangle sitting between the demand and supply curves stretching between those two quantities. AP exam alert, DWL is always a triangle sitting between the D and S curves. Locate the two relevant quantities first, the efficient one and the actual one, then shade the triangle between them every single time. Let's apply that DWL method to the most common exam scenario of all, an excise tax. 5 things change when government adds a per unit tax. 1. The supply curve shifts left, up, by exactly the amount of the tax. 2. Buyers now pay a higher price, PD, while sellers only keep a lower price, PS. The gap between the two is the tax. 3. Both CS and PS shrink from where they started. 4. A DWL triangle appears. It represents trades that used to happen but no longer do, because the tax priced them out. 5. The government collects tax revenue, a rectangle, tax per unit times the new, smaller quantity traded. AP exam alert. Label every single piece on your graph, PD, PS, the new quantity, QT, the CS region, the PS region, the tax revenue rectangle, and the DWL triangle. Free response graders check each of these individually. A correct-looking graph with a missing label still loses points. We just watched a tax squeeze a market from both sides. So here's the reverse card. What happens when the government pays producers for every unit instead? That payment is a per unit subsidy. Think of it as a negative excise tax, so everything flips. The supply curve shifts down to the right by exactly the subsidy amount, and the price splits in two. Consumers pay the lower price, PC, while producers receive PP, the consumer price plus the subsidy. Both sides win, and quantity expands from Q1 to Q2. Sounds like free money. So here's the catch. The government's bill is the subsidy times all Q2 units, that big rectangle between PP and PC. Consumer surplus grew, producer surplus grew, but their combined gain is smaller than that rectangle, and the leftover sliver is deadweight loss, the triangle between supply and demand, from Q1 to Q2, pointing left at the old equilibrium. Why a loss when quantity went OP? Because every unit past Q1 costs society more to make than anyone values it. We're overproducing. Government spending breaks down into three pieces: the consumer gain, plus the producer gain, plus the deadweight loss. AP exam alert, 2 graph traps. 1. The subsidy DWL triangle sits to the right of Q1 and points left toward equilibrium, the mirror image of the tax triangle. If you shade it on the tax side, that's an instant miss. 2. Label both prices, consumers pay PC, producers receive PP, and the vertical gap PP minus PC is exactly the subsidy per unit. FRQs love asking for the price received by sellers, specifically to catch students who only mark one price. The tax revenue math is identical either way, but who actually ends up paying more of it, buyers or sellers? It all comes down to elasticity of demand. When demand is inelastic, a steep curve, buyers can't easily avoid the tax. They need the good regardless of price, so consumers end up bearing more of the burden. When demand is elastic, a flat curve, buyers can switch away easily, so producers end up absorbing more of the burden instead, since they can't pass the full tax on without losing customers. AP exam alert. The general rule in one sentence: whichever side of the market is less elastic, has fewer options to escape the tax, ends up paying more of it. That single sentence answers the majority of tax incidence questions on the exam. Zoom all the way out to the whole world now. Why do countries even bother trading, and why would a government want to tax that trade? Why trade? Specialization plus comparative advantage, remember that from Unit 1, equals gains from trade. Each country produces what it's relatively best at, then exchanges with others, and total output rises for everyone involved. A tariff is simply a tax on imports. Governments impose one for three main reasons: to protect domestic industries from cheaper foreign competition, to raise government revenue, and sometimes for political pressure on other countries. First, the baseline case: trade with no tariff at all. Here's what's happening. The world price, PW, sits below the domestic equilibrium price. At that lower world price, domestic quantity demanded is greater than domestic quantity supplied, and that gap gets filled entirely by imports. Consumers come out ahead with a larger CS since they're paying the lower world price. Domestic producers lose ground to importers with a smaller PS since they can't compete on price. But add it all up and total surplus actually rises overall. Free trade is a net win for the country as a whole, even though it's not a win for every single person inside it. Now government adds a tariff on top of that trade. What breaks? The tariff raises the price paid domestically from PW up to PT. Domestic quantity supplied rises since domestic producers can now compete at the higher price, but total import volume shrinks. Government collects tariff revenue on whatever imports still come through, and two deadweight loss triangles appear: lost gains from trade that the tariff destroyed. Domestic producers gain with more PS since they're getting a higher price now, but consumers lose more than producers gain. It's a net loss to society overall, which is exactly what those two DWL triangles represent. AP exam alert. A tariff's deadweight loss is two triangles, not one, unlike the single DWL triangle from an excise tax. One triangle comes from production that shouldn't be happening domestically anymore, the other from consumption that got priced out. Draw both every time. Boss fight, round 1. 8 questions covering demand, supply, and equilibrium. Same rules as Unit 1. I read it, you answer out loud. Actually say it, that's how you find the gaps. Then we check on the very next slide. Pause here if you want a minute. No grades, no pressure, just you versus the unit. Take a run at all 8, then hit play when you're ready for the answers. Okay, let's clear it. And I'm giving you the why behind each one, the way a reader wants to see it on the free response. Check yourself against each one. Anything that feels shaky is your signal to rewind to that slide. 2.13 reasons demand slopes downward. The substitution effect, the income effect, and diminishing marginal utility. All 3 point the same direction. A higher price makes you buy less. 2.2. Timer, taste and preferences, income, market size, expectations, related goods price. Any of these shifts the whole demand curve. 2.3 rotten, resource costs, other goods price, technology, taxes and subsidies, expectations, number of sellers. Any of these shifts the whole supply curve. 2.4a move. Along a curve is triggered by a change in that good's own price. A shift of the whole curve is triggered by a non-price factor. Timer for demand, rotten for supply. 2.5 demand increases while supply stays put. Price goes up and quantity goes up. They move in the same direction, which is always true for a demand-only shift. 2.6 supply decreases while demand stays put. Price goes up and quantity goes down. They move in opposite directions, which is always true for a supply-only shift. 2.7 demand rises and supply falls together. Price is certainly up, since both shifts push it the same way. Quantity is indeterminate. It depends on which curve shifted more. 2.8a surplus. At a price above equilibrium, quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. Sellers are willing to offer more than buyers actually want at that price. Round 2 of the boss fight. Elasticity, controls, and trade this time. Same drill. Answer out loud, then check on the next slide. Take your run at all 8, then hit play when you're ready. Let's clear round 2. Same as before. Anything shaky, rewind to that slide before moving on to Unit 3. 2.9 PED equals percent change in quantity demanded, divided by percent change in price. Ignore the sign. Always report it using the absolute value. 2.10. The 4 determinants of PED, substitutes, necessity versus luxury, time horizon, and share of income. The STAL mnemonic. 2.11. If demand is inelastic and price rises, total revenue rises. Quantity falls, but by a smaller percentage than price rises, so the price effect wins out. 2.12 for CPED and YED. The sign tells you the direction of the relationship. Substitutes and normal goods give a positive sign. Complements and inferior goods give a negative sign. 2.13a price ceiling is a maximum price, set below equilibrium. A price floor is a minimum price, set above equilibrium. 2.14 deadweight loss is the lost surplus from mutually beneficial trades that no longer happen. On the graph, it's the triangle between the demand and supply curves, stretching from the actual quantity traded to the efficient quantity. 2.15. The inelastic side bears more of the tax burden. They can't easily avoid the tax by switching behavior, so they end up absorbing more of it. 2.16. 2 effects of a tariff on the domestic market. Domestic price and domestic quantity supplied both rise, while import volume shrinks. Government collects tariff revenue, and deadweight loss appears. Any 2, though all 4 are worth knowing. And that's Unit 2, boss cleared. Twice over. So here's everywhere we've been. Demand and supply describe how buyers and sellers behave on their own. Equilibrium is where those 2 curves settle. Elasticity measures exactly how hard each side reacts to change, and government stepping in, price controls, taxes, tariffs, always trades away some efficiency, which shows up as deadweight loss on your graph. Get that? And you're ready for these questions on the exam, not just familiar with them. Hit subscribe if you want Unit 3 waiting for you. That's production, cost, and perfect competition, where we stop describing the market from outside and start building the firm side of the story from the ground up. See you there.